So this is a real bummer. Just got word through Jennifer Lee Chan, works for NBC Sports Bay Area, that Dre Greenlaw has suffered a serious quad injury while working out. He's obviously now a member of the Denver Broncos, but I know that this is of interest to 49ers fans. Now, there seems to be some dispute in reporting regarding the severity of the injury. Story first came out via Jennifer, so we'll put this up first. Sustained a serious leg injury, she wrote. Multiple sources told NBC Sports Bay Area. Greenlaw suffered a torn quadriceps while working out. The injury could force him to miss a substantial portion of the coming NFL season. Now, I mentioned that there is conflicting reporting here. This right here is coming from Parker J. Gabriel, who covers the Denver Broncos. He writes that Broncos linebacker Dre Greenlaw did suffer a quad injury working out, but a source familiar with the situation says it's a strain and should cost him a matter of weeks rather than months. The regular season is not expected to be in jeopardy for the Denver free agent. So on the one hand, there's a report coming from Jennifer and multiple sources. Somebody who covers the 49ers obviously has a connection to Dre Greenlaw or somebody close to him, saying that this could really threaten Dre Greenlaw's regular season, torn quad. And on the other side, you have somebody coming from covering the Broncos saying that this is a strain and that it's not really expected to mess with his regular season. To that, I'll say that there is some degree of potato here. We should establish that a strain is a tear. The severity is what the question is. But anytime that there's a strain in a muscle, there are muscle fibers that do tear. So even if it's a grade 1 strain, there are muscle fiber tears. Now, torn completely off the bone, that's something very severe. That's going to be different than a strain. So every single strain is a tear, but not all tears are strains, if that makes sense. And we don't know, based on these two reports, exactly where the truth lies for Dre Greenlaw. But I will say that I do trust Jennifer's reporting, and I don't think this would have seen the light of day had it just been something minor for Dre Greenlaw. He obviously was a cherished and valued 49er, was a big part of the turnaround effort for San Francisco from 2019 to 2024. And what he did on that football field against the Rams on that Thursday night in December after coming off of the torn Achilles, I think 49ers fans should salute. I think any fan of football should salute. I'd never seen anybody fly around the field the way that Dre Greenlaw did coming off that torn Achilles in the Super Bowl. That was suffered in mid-February, and he was back out there in December making plays, was the 49ers leading tackler against the Rams. That being said, the reason that San Francisco was not hot in pursuit of Dre Greenlaw until the very end, when they thought that maybe they could outbid Denver and get him to switch his commitment. The reason that they didn't re-sign him early was because of the injury concern, because of the durability concern. I mean, this is something we talked about over the course of several weeks, from the end of the regular season all the way up to the point where Dre Greenlaw signed with the Broncos. We said that the 49ers are going to be very cautious in their pursuit of re-signing Dre Greenlaw because they weren't sure how his body would hold up. He was coming off of the torn Achilles, and even after playing so well against the Rams, he only could manage a half in that game, and then he could only manage 4 plays the next week against the Miami Dolphins before they had to shut him down. So San Francisco, looking to get healthier, looking to get younger, looking to get faster this offseason, was approaching the whole Dre Greenlaw situation very gingerly. Ultimately, the Broncos and Dre Greenlaw ended up agreeing to terms. It's a 3-year contract worth a little bit north of $30 million in total money. And then the 49ers went to Denver with a little bit more guaranteed early on in the contract, or they actually went to Dallas or the Texas area, wherever Dre Greenlaw lives. I believe it's in the Dallas area. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan flew there trying to get Greenlaw to renege on his commitment to the Broncos and re-sign with the 49ers. It was during that window there between Monday and Wednesday of the free agency week where Greenlaw had agreed to terms but could not yet sign on Wednesday. Greenlaw ultimately decided to sign with the Broncos. The 49ers have moved in a different direction at linebacker. In fact, they signed a player whom they compared to Dre Greenlaw this past weekend in Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State. And we could talk a little bit about him and the comp to Dre Greenlaw. But that's how this entire situation unfolded. And now the Denver Broncos are going to be dealing with this quad injury for Dre Greenlaw. Again, I know that this is probably primarily a 49ers audience. And I know that the 49ers audience really respects what Dre Greenlaw was able to bring to the table for the 49ers, not only from a performance standpoint, but from a mentality standpoint over the past half decade. I think that his impact will live on in the 49ers building. It already does live on in the 49ers building. When we look at this NFL draft, the 49ers went out and they got Nick Martin, who has this awfully impressive relative athletic score, which is evocative of what Dre Greenlaw brought to the 49ers. Now, Martin's smaller than Greenlaw, but Greenlaw was not the biggest linebacker. Martin's 5'11", 221. Greenlaw probably in the 230s. But it was the arm length of Dre Greenlaw that drew the 49ers to him in the 5th round of that 2019 draft. And it was the arm length of Nick Martin that really sealed the deal for the 49ers in their determination to go after him in the 3rd round of this 2025 draft. 31.75 inches. When we talked to John Lynch after the pick on Friday, he kept on mentioning that the arm length reminded them of Dre Greenlaw. And you know what else reminded the 49ers of Dre Greenlaw? The run and hit tape of Nick Martin. So when I talk about the legacy that Dre Greenlaw left in that 49ers building, it's exactly that. I mean, this guy would play with his hair on fire for the 49ers. He would run and he would hit, run and hit. And I think it's becoming a little bit of a lost art in the NFL. It's becoming a softer league. The rules changes have obviously led to a lot of that, but the game is also sped up on the outside. It's downsized. The guys are getting smaller. You could see the 49ers defense getting smaller. Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are smaller than Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, and now Nick Martin is smaller than Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. So each successive generation of defenders here is downsizing. It's getting a little bit faster. In the case of Nick Martin, you could see he's running a blazing 40 at 4.5. And that's another thing that's evocative of Greenlaw, who's actually the fastest player on Arkansas's defense back when he was in college. They measured that by the GPS chips. But anyway, Greenlaw was able to maintain the old school violence while playing with new age speed. That's why he was such an effective player for the 49ers. And that's why they're looking for players who bring a similar skill set as him moving forward. And that's why Nick Martin is the one that we're talking about now. Scouts have called him a heat-seeking missile. And I believe that's exactly what Dre Greenlaw was for the 49ers as well. Those of you just joining us, though, really bad news coming out of Denver. This is courtesy of Jennifer Lee Chan, who actually covers the 49ers. She says that Dre Greenlaw has suffered a serious quad injury. She called it a torn quadriceps in her article. This may cause Dre Greenlaw to miss a substantial portion of the upcoming 2025 NFL season. There is conflicting reporting, though, and in the interest of bringing everything out onto the table here, Parker Gabriel, who covers the Broncos over in Denver, said that Greenlaw, although he did suffer an injury, it's only a strain and should only cost him a matter of weeks rather than months. To that, again, I say that a strain is a tear. There are torn muscle fibers. I think both reports agree on that. The timing is what matters here. And this automatically makes us go back to the 49ers cost-benefit analysis in pursuing Dre Greenlaw, a player who was so good for them, but especially following the Achilles tear in the Super Bowl, brought many, many injury concerns and availability concerns for the 49ers moving forward. And you take a big step back and you look at how San Francisco has renovated this roster. And we now have the final product coming out of draft week. We see it right here. The 49ers, all the green, by the way, those are rookies that the 49ers have added. There's a lot of rookies up and down this entire roster for San Francisco. They filled a ton of needs. One of the rookies happens to be Nick Martin at the linebacker position. I've got him at the third linebacker position, but I think Nick Martin right here is definitely going to compete for that second linebacker position. And the goal for San Francisco was to become healthier, hungrier, faster, younger. They were the oldest team in football last year. Dre Greenlaw is not a young player either. He's been around the league since 2019. And there is firm data that shows that age and injury rate is correlated. Older players do get hurt more. And Dre Greenlaw obviously had that very checkered injury history. And it's ultimately why the 49ers did move on from him. They could have re-signed him earlier in the process before Denver even had a chance to get the Dre Greenlaw, but they didn't do that. The 49ers were cautious with their asking price, and now they're going to have to hope that they get better health and more availability from Nick Martin, because it really looks like the Denver Broncos are going to be dealing with a headache of an injury situation now that Dre Greenlaw has injured his quad. But, just really, really gutting news, just hearing that. I'm a fan of football. I'm not a fan of a team. I'm a fan of the sport. And Dre Greenlaw is, for a fan of the sport, Dre Greenlaw is a total joy to watch. Just because he's a throwback, but he hybridizes that throwback hard-hitting mentality with modern speed, which, Dre Greenlaw at his best is an absolute superstar, but availability is the best of ability, and there hadn't been a whole lot of availability in recent years, or the recent year for Dre Greenlaw. I mean, the 2024 campaign, he was dealing with a lot. The Achilles, had the tendonitis going on. And then obviously he had a practice on this is 2023, actually. To the 2023 campaign, the Achilles tendonitis was what he was battling through. He had a practice on that spongy field ahead of the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. And then he tore his Achilles running out onto the field. But the way that Dre plays was conducive to bruises, for sure. I mean, there was a season 2021 where he only played in a couple games before he was available at the very end of it. So the 49ers, when they moved forward this offseason, when it was clear that Dre was not going to return to them, they went to the draft. They liked several players. Nick Martin was the one they liked the most. They picked him up in the third round, but there were other guys. Kane Medrano, the really fast linebacker from UCLA, he visited. So did Chris Paul Jr., the quick linebacker from Ole Miss. They ended up getting another Ole Miss player in Jordan Watkins, the receiver. The 49ers were intent on replacing Dre Greenlaw with characteristics that he had brought to the table for them over the years. And I think speed and intensity and violence were at the top of that list for the 49ers. So rough news on this Sunday afternoon. I'm going to open it up to some 49ers questions, maybe give a little bit of a preview of my 49ers roster breakdown. We're going to have our first 53-man roster projection when it comes to looking at where these rookies are going to slot in. That's going to be coming up on the San Francisco Standard this week. We are wrapping up the NFL draft. The most in-depth analysis of the NFL draft is up on the San Francisco Standard. So I want to make sure that you guys don't miss that. This is what it looks like. One of the replacements for the 49ers is up on the screen right there. That's CJ West, the big defensive tackle out of the University of Indiana via Kent State. The 49ers have officially now signed their undrafted free agents, 6 of them. So I did a big video this morning, already has 30,000 views. So I know that most of you guys are probably caught up on that. But this morning, the big video was focused on the 6 bodies that the 49ers added to both sides of the football. The undrafted free agents are Corey Kiner, the running back, Isaiah Nair, the wide receiver, Drew Moss, just a mauling guard. We'll play some tape of him in just a little bit. Sebastian Valdez, defensive tackle out of Washington. Stone Blanton, a Mississippi State linebacker who got a $92,000 guarantee. And Jacob Robinson, a DB out of BYU who fits the mold physically of a lot of the DBs and linebackers like Nick Martin that the 49ers have been eyeing lately. Explosive player, but a little undersized for San Francisco. So those 6 guys have officially signed. What that means is that the 49ers, when you add 6 to 11, the 11-player draft class, which was the biggest in the NFL this year, added 17 rookies this weekend. The 17 rookies mean that the 49ers now have 89 of 90 roster spots filled. There's one spot left. The reason it's 89 and not 90 is that Isaac Alarcón, the Mexican player on the 49ers team, is an international exemption. So he doesn't count against the 90-man roster limit. So what you saw there on the roster, that is nearly complete, but the 49ers have one spot left heading into this rookie minicamp season. Following rookie minicamp, there will be OTAs. It is important to note that following the NFL draft, the 49ers can add a free agent without that free agent counting against the compensatory pick formula. And we know that the 49ers love to play the comp pick game. That's why they had the most picks in the NFL draft. The Ravens love playing the comp pick game too. They, like the 49ers, had 11 picks in this NFL draft. And the 49ers next year, they're going to probably max out the comp pick formula again because so many of those guys, including Dre Greenlaw, walked in free agency this year. It's a way for the 49ers to have more darts to throw up against the wall in the NFL draft, which is a really, really smart way of building a team. The Patriots under Bill Belichick did that. The Ravens, obviously, under Ozzie Newsome, they still do that. And now the 49ers under Lynch and Shanahan have actually led the NFL in procuring as many comp picks as possible. Anyway, they can sign a free agent after the NFL draft without that free agent hurting their comp pick formula, because the window is the start of free agency to the NFL draft. So we can talk about adding somebody like Amari Cooper. We can talk about adding somebody like Jedrick Willis Jr. And I think that when you look at the roster and needs, there's only one red cell now. That's right here. That's at swing tackle. Jedrick Willis, who played for the Browns, still 25 years old. 49ers have had more success adding free agent offensive linemen in the past than rookie offensive linemen. Might that be somebody who the 49ers add to round out their 90-man roster? Amari Cooper could be that guy too, but I think only at the right price, because the 49ers were interested in veteran receivers like Cooper Kupp, like Devontae Adams, but both of those guys they were interested in only at the right price. So we have to keep our eye on free agents now, because that's opened up and the comp pick formula is no longer of concern to the 49ers. And we'll also take a look at the rookie minicamp, which is going to involve a tryout as well. They're going to invite some guys who are not on the roster, who were not drafted, and they're going to partake in what is essentially a 2-day practice coming up next week on Thursday and Friday. And they may sign somebody from that. The 49ers have signed a defensive lineman. I forgot who it was, but they did sign, he's no longer with the team, a defensive lineman from that rookie tryout. I believe it was last year or the year prior to that. So it's not unheard of to see a player get a chance out of this event. And if the 49ers have one roster spot, then they'll definitely utilize that. The 49ers also do need to add a second kicker. Remember that they said that they were going to add competition for Jake Moody, either through the NFL draft, undrafted free agency, or more likely through a veteran addition. So Nick Folk, maybe he can come on down. Maybe he'll sign with the 49ers now. Again, even if they sign a kicker now who's a veteran, he will not count against the compensatory formula. So the 49ers could use that final spot on a kicker. They could use it on if Jedrick Willis Jr. wants to sign and they want him. If Amari Cooper wants to come, they could sign Amari Cooper. They obviously can also at any time cut somebody to open up some extra room. So it's not like they're working with this extremely limited amount of space. But that's just what's next for the 49ers after they finalized the UDFA signing list today. Those 6 players plus the 11 draftees officially coming aboard for San Francisco. All right, we're 20 minutes in. Why don't we answer some questions? How's everybody doing? Good evening to you as well. How about today? Watching some baseball. I was watching the Giants and they won on a little league home run. It was absolutely crazy. It was a little dribbler, nobody on, bottom of the 9th inning, little dribbler down the third base line, and just a wild throw to first base, goes down the first base line. Runner moves up to second. Thought about stopping at second, but Matt Williams, the third base coach, was like, no, come on to third. So he sprinted to third. And then the throw from way down in right field got away from the third baseman because it was a bad throw. And Ramos, I believe it was Ramos, came in from third base and scored a Little League home run. It was like a bunch of 8-year-olds playing, except it was a major league game. It was quite possibly the funniest finish that I had ever seen to a baseball game. It was insane, as Nick says. I agree with him. So Bay Area sports had themselves a hell of a run this weekend. The Giants win on a Little League home run. The 49ers put together the biggest draft class in the NFL, 11 players. And the Warriors, without Jimmy Butler, beat the Houston Rockets in Game 3 of their NBA playoff series. Game 4 is at Chase Center tomorrow. So thumbs up across the board for the Bay Area teams this weekend. Obviously, we don't know how this 49ers draft class will perform. All we can talk about is the strategy. I always laugh today because everybody tries to come out with their draft grades and they think that they've reinvented the wheel or something with these draft grades. And it's like, guys, anybody that's partaking in a draft grade is not partaking in serious analysis. You cannot grade something that has not yet had a chance to perform. It's like grading my math test before I've had a chance to even fill out question number 1. Like, what's the point? Like, we need to see this draft class actually deliver at the NFL level, and whether they deliver well or whether they deliver poorly is not going to be determined on April 27th of 2025. The book is not going to really open until September. I get it. We're going to have training camp and OTAs before then. But draft grades, they're so laughably premature. It's a way to get your clicks. I think people should just stick with analyzing the strategy of the draft. And that's what we're doing over the course of probably the next few months. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot better than the pre-draft process because then everybody is speculating. Now we get to work with firm data, firm names. The 49ers have added a lot. One thing, I'll give you guys a little sneak peek into my initial 53-man roster projection for the 49ers. Last year, the Rams saw 14 rookies make their initial 53-man roster. The 49ers and rookies right here are highlighted in green. Everything to the left of the dividing line is the 53-man roster projection. Everything to the right of this dividing line, those are the players who won't make the 53 according to the projection, but might be on the practice squad. That's a 16-player practice squad. That's just how I'm viewing it right now. Obviously, there are going to be competitions. There are going to be developments over the course of the next few months. But so you see all the green littered throughout this 49ers depth chart and roster, and you realize that last year the Rams had 36 rookies. They had even more. 49ers currently have 17 players shaded in green here. The Rams, if you looked at their version of this last year, had 36. 14 of them ended up making the 53-man roster. How many do I have projected to make the 53? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 projected to make the 53 for the 49ers. Maybe 10 if Curtis Rourke, the Canadian quarterback, is healthy enough to be activated by the time of the regular season, coming off the ACL surgery. But so we're saying about 10 rookies are projected to make the 49ers 53-man roster. For context, they averaged about 5 rookies making the 53-man roster in each of the past 3 seasons. It went, I believe, 4, 6, and 5 for the 49ers. So an average of 5. They had a crowded, veteran-laden roster over the course of the past 3 seasons to where they averaged only 5 rookies making the team year in and year out. This year, I'm projecting them to have about 10 rookies make the roster, and that is a significant difference. That's twice as much. They're not going to be like the Rams last year who had enough room for 14 rookies to make the team, but splitting the difference at about 9 or 10 instead of just 5, well, the 49ers are going to be significantly younger this year. On top of that, it's not just that they're projected to have rookies make the team this year. They're going to have rookie starters make the team this year and in a fairly large amount. we don't project any rookie starters on the offensive side of the ball. Remember, green is the color denoting a rookie that the 49ers just added to the team this weekend. But look at all the rookie starters we project on the defensive side of the ball. CJ West, defensive tackle out of Indiana. Alfred Collins, the big defensive tackle out of the University of Texas. Mikael Williams, obviously the number one pick for the 49ers, pick number 11 for San Francisco in that first round. Yes, Mikael Williams is projected to be a starter opposite Nick Bosa on that defensive line. Then there's Nick Martin, who we were just talking about when we were looking at the relative athletic score. Yes, I do project him to be a starter, at least the third linebacker, so starter and base. But I think that he's going to really challenge D. Winters immediately for the starting weak side linebacker job. And then Upton Stout, I think, is he the leader in the clubhouse to be the nickel cornerback? It's either Upton Stout or Marquise Siegel. And I think Marquise Siegel is a little bit more of a safety, although he did play cornerback in the past at North Dakota State. So we can't rule out the positional adaptability for Marquise Siegel. I just think that Upton Stout's in the driver's seat. So I think that you can have up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rookies starting on defense for the 49ers in 2025, which would be very, very exceptional. I mean, the Rams, I'm going to have to look up to see exactly how many started for them. I know 14 made the team. We'll see how many rookies started on defense, but they'd had the lowest defensive cash spend of any team in football last year. And then they struggled early on, but they rounded into form by December. And that was big because they were ready to go for the playoffs. And the Rams actually came closer to knocking off the Eagles than any other NFL team. All right, we've got some questions and concerns. A lot of you are concerned about the offensive line. So why don't we talk about that? This is from Michael. Let me read his concern. Thank him for his super chat. Michael McBurney says, we did not prioritize offensive line in the draft and did not try to address it in free agency. I get that we needed more help on defense with so many starters missing, but Brock is going to have to up his running skills next year. Okay, so a couple things. One, the 49ers, yes, they didn't prioritize offensive line because they picked a lineman in the 7th round. And it looks like he might be a good player. I wouldn't bet against guys from the University of Iowa. It's Connor Colby. He's a very, very athletic lineman who started for 4 years at Iowa, started at multiple different positions. So he's done some good stuff for the Hawkeyes. That's George Kittle's alma mater. Last year, the 49ers, people were saying a lot of the same stuff. Oh, they didn't get anybody for the offensive line, but they saw Dominic Pooney become a day one starter. So you've got to give Connor Colby a chance. And you have to realize that just because the 49ers don't follow the analysts' big board, like Mel Kiper Jr., they're not looking at his big board and saying, oh, we got to draft the way that Mel Kiper would. They're doing their own research. And they're probably doing more research than somebody like Mel Kiper Jr. because they're actually in a building. They're not just media covering the team. So their evaluation of things is going to be different. And just because it doesn't mirror what you see as the consensus from the media doesn't mean that it's a bad draft. I think last year's a great example. A lot of people were freaking out at this time, leaving the draft. What happened? It was a great draft for the 49ers. Those guys, 5, 6 players from that draft had major roles and played well as rookies in 2024. One of them was an offensive lineman who was a day one starter. That being said, the 49ers offensive line, and I've been the first since I remember in 2019 after the Super Bowl talking about how they need to upgrade this unit in pass protection. So I've been banging this drum for a good 5 or 6 years. Let me just get that out of the way. And, it started to become cool. I pride myself on leading 49ers thought, and a lot of my takes end up becoming cool like a year after. So people try to roast me for them, and then all of a sudden they adopt the same take later. This offensive line take definitely falls in that category. I was talking about the offensive line in 2019, 2020, 2021, and then people finally got on board. Maybe in 2020 they did, but they got on board a little bit later. Week 8 was really ugly in 2020. So yes, the 49ers can use improvement in pass protection, but I simultaneously realize that this is a salary capped league, and you're not going to be able to pay through the nose for every single position. You can't build an all-star team on both sides of the ball. So you have to prioritize things by order of weakness, right? So the biggest weaknesses on this 49ers team, the three biggest ones, did not include the offensive line last year. There was the separation, wide receiver separation, number 32, special teams, number 32, and run defense, number 29. Pass block win rate, PFF pass block grade, pressures allowed, run blocking. The 49ers were all, if you looked at the data for the offensive line, they were in the middle of the pack or slightly below it last year. They did not rank in the low 20s. They did not rank dead last. They ranked dead last in or close to it in three other major categories. None of those was anywhere close to the offensive line. It didn't pertain to the offensive line. So that is like some of the biggest context that we need to have here. People are freaking out about the line when the line is a big problem around the vast majority of the league. There just aren't enough good offensive linemen to combat what's happening along the defensive line. Some of the best athletes are playing on the edge and moving into defensive tackle. So you saw it in the draft this year. You had this oversupply of really quality defensive linemen, and that's why the 49ers decided to dip into it. So many great defensive linemen. Take advantage of that. Rebuild your defensive line, just like the Rams did, just like the Eagles have done over the years. The Eagles never really had a rebuild. They've just been reloading it, right? Hargrave leaves. They add Jalen Carter. Take a little bit out of the Rams playbook. Take a little bit out of the Eagles playbook, or a lot out of both playbooks. Rebuild that defensive line. But for the offensive line for San Francisco, there just hasn't been that type of talent that they would need to replace a guy like Trent Williams in the NFL draft when they've picked. Name the tackle that would have successfully given the 49ers the ability to immediately hand a torch to him this year in this draft. The guys I can think of are Armand Membu, Will Campbell, and maybe Kelvin Banks Jr. Guess where all three of those linemen were picked? They were all picked in the top 10 before the 49ers went at number 11. So then you start moving to your linemen who are going to be more like projects, right? Arante Ursary was the name that I had in the mock draft to the 49ers. They decided, even though they hosted Ursary, they decided that they had better value elsewhere than a project offensive lineman who wouldn't necessarily make their team better this season. They saw more value in the later rounds, and that's why they ended up with a player like Connor Colby coming out of Iowa. Last year, they approached it in a similar fashion, except they picked a little bit higher for that offensive lineman, and they brought in Dominic Pooney. He became a starter. Don't blink when we turn up in September and we see that Connor Colby is the starting left guard for this football team. Then all of a sudden people will say, maybe they did invest enough in the offensive line. But the main point is that you can't spend the capital everywhere. Like, it's just, you have to look at what your biggest weaknesses are. Then you have to look at what you have to spend. Then you have to look at who's available at each pick. And unless you're force feeding picks, and I think a lot of fans do that on video games, they're like, okay, this is a perfectly set up video game world. Now we have to use a pick on an offensive lineman. Unless you're doing that, then it's not going to work out in the way that people on Twitter want it to work out. You have to have the pick and the need and the talent available at the time align, and it just didn't for the 49ers until the 7th round with Connor Colby this year. Again, they have seen the most value along the offensive line when they've acquired veterans. Trent Williams is a great example. That was through a trade in 2020. Alex Mack signing in 2021. Weston Richburg in 2018. I truly believe that center has been a position. I don't know if this is changing in the NFL now, given the fact that some younger centers have succeeded. But when I first started covering the 49ers and I saw them sign Richburg and I saw them sign Mack, I truly believe that's a position in Shanahan's scheme that you should pay for. It's a rising tide that lifts all boats. And then you could benefit from it as a whole, as an offensive line. So I thought that maybe they'd be in on Drew Dahlman over the course of free agency. But I also recognize that this is a team that is working under a salary cap. that's going to be top 3 in spend again after this Brock Purdy deal is done, after the George Kittle deal is done. And you can't just decide to fork over 15 to 20 million to a center when you're already at the very top of the spend and you've got a record-setting contract, maybe 2 record-setting contracts to give to a quarterback and to a tight end coming up. So you've got to balance the budget, and the 49ers are going about it in this particular way. You're trying to fit in between a rock and a hard place if you're the 49ers. And that's just how it's been. And, you know, a lot of this criticism of the offensive line is really, really oversimplified. And I think that a lot of it is rooted in some kind of assumption that the 49ers offensive line ranks last in the league when they don't. The offensive line has been relatively middle of the pack. They were actually worse in 2023 when the 49ers were a play away from winning the Super Bowl than they were in 2024. The grading across the board was worse in the Super Bowl year than it was in 2024. So if this offensive line is good enough to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and I think that that's like very clear that they are, but the defensive line certainly clearly is not good enough to win the Super Bowl, playing the type of run defense and just the type of overall defense they did last year. It makes complete sense that you would dedicate the bulk of your investment to fixing the defense. Are the Giants really in first place? That's a hell of a way to get into first place. The good old Little League home run for the Giants. I mean, if you guys want, I could do an entire video on the offensive line strategy. I've talked about this for years. I don't think it's necessarily shocking. If I'm running the team, I sign a center. I prioritize center over some other positions, and we can discuss which one. Like, I don't want to get too far into team building strategy right now without sitting down and kind of preparing something a little bit more organized for you guys. But you know my thoughts. I think that center was something that the 49ers prioritized as a big money position earlier in Kyle Shanahan's tenure. We saw it with Richburg. We saw it with Mack. Unfortunately, there were injuries to Richburg and an early retirement, or not early, but just a retirement from Alex Mack. Since then, they have not gone big money at center. And I do think that their pass protection hadn't been as good as it was in 2021 since then, in large part because of that. So I would focus more on the center position. That would be the one tweak that I make. I'm not a big, the 49ers have to bench McKivitz and just throw somebody else out there guy, because I'm a realist. I understand that tackle is really, really hard to come by in this league. But I think at center, you can pay for a veteran who cerebrally commands the game and has a strong anchor, and he makes everybody else around him better. That's where I stand on the offensive line issue. Feliciano retired as well. Yes, you were right. And that really was a boost for the 49ers in 2023 when he took over for Spencer Burford. But then John got hurt early in the Super Bowl. So that, again, was something that hurt the 49ers down the stretch of that game. Michael thinks that Hennessy may start at center. He might give Brendel some competition, although it seems that they're looking at Hennessy more as a guard than a center. So Brendel right now is in the total driver's seat for center. And I'm scrolling up to the offensive side of the ball here. Matt Hennessy is, if he ends up being on the 53-man roster, maybe he's the guy that pushes it at left guard. I'm going to keep him over here on the right side for now. Drew Moss, we've got a little bit of tape of him. This guy, Drew Moss, lineman from Colorado State, tossing some people around like a rag doll. This was posted today to social media, some Drew Moss tape. Why don't we take a look at it? Always fun to watch O-line tape, isn't it? Here we go. Got to get the video file out. Got to find it. Our earlier show, I was featuring a sandwich. That was a lot of fun. Take a look at this from Drew Moss. I mean, the dude is impressive. There's a lot of guys getting thrown around by Drew Moss in the tape. Playing right tackle for Colorado State. Look at this poor linebacker, safety. Yeah, he's probably got a 90-pound disadvantage, maybe more. But Drew Moss was a people mover in that run game. And he's going to get a shot for the 49ers at one of those guard positions. That's one of the undrafted free agents that San Francisco signed. Pancake City, indeed. Rob loves it. All right, guys, let's toss in a couple of your questions. I'm working on my big 49ers 53-man roster projection. Mike texts me and he says, maybe the 49ers signed Brunskill, Daniel Brunskill. He's still a free agent. This roster is obviously far from finished. This is just the first version of the 89-man roster that we'll see. One spot. It's going to be a living and breathing entity over the course of the next few months before the 49ers make the first cut down. Once they make that cut down at the end of August, even that's just going to be the first version of the roster for the 49ers, the first version of the 53. So you're constantly making changes and additions to this in the National Football League. Any chance of Isaiah Nayer making the 53-man? Yes, there's a chance of him making the 50. I did a whole video on it this morning. The undrafted free agents. I mean, Isaiah Nayer might be the best athlete, period, in this entire draft class. Dane Brugler said that. He's a 4.40 40. He's 6'4". He's 220 pounds. This could be the steal of 2025 for the 49ers. The problem is that he was inconsistent in college. He had a big knee injury that derailed his time at Texas. Then he went to Nebraska. He needs to learn how to leverage his body a little bit better because when you're 6'4", 220 and you can run like the wind, I mean, these are T.O. type measurables, and he's even taller than T.O. T.O.'s son happens to be on the team, Tariq Owens. I mean, this guy, this is a physical specimen. So, yes, he has a chance of making the 53, especially given the uncertainty at the receiver position. You've got Demarcus Robinson facing a potential suspension for the 49ers to start the season, DUI arrest in December. Brandon Ayuk may not be ready for the start of the year. They just added a rookie in Jordan Watkins. So you've got Pearsall, Jennings, Watkins, and Cowing as your four, barring an injury, your four locks to step in for the 49ers at the start of the season. So then, if Demarcus Robinson and Brandon Ayuk aren't ready, you might have as many as two receivers from this side move up into the rotation for San Francisco. So I'm saying that Amari Cooper is not out of the question for the 49ers. They're interested in him in 2024. Why wouldn't they be interested in him in 2025? So you've got Nayer and Tariq Owens, I think, at the top of the list of players knocking on the door of that 53-man roster for San Francisco. All right, guys. Time for me to get going. We might do one more show today. So hit that alarm bell. Hit the like button. It's still draft weekend. I might be exhausted, but I am committed to giving you guys the most comprehensive 49ers coverage that there is. So I think that we're not done yet. And hopefully you're signing up for the San Francisco Standard since I'm sitting here grinding without sleep to give you all this coverage. But hours and hours. I got some great news to drop. We had something like Mike may have a more exact number, but we set our viewership record for the NFL draft this weekend as far as how many views we got. I could tell you guys how many we ended up getting total. And I don't know how many we get today, but I still counted as part of the draft with undrafted free agents. But over the first 3 days of the draft, we were well over 500,000. I think well over 600,000, maybe even 700,000 views. So congratulations to you viewers. You're watching the most watched 49ers YouTube channel in all of the universe. Appreciate all you guys. I think Mike may have the exact number. Well over 600,000 in 48 hours. So in a 2-day stretch, over 600,000 of you watched. This is becoming a whole movement. I absolutely love it. So hit that sub button, hit the like button, and check out the Standard. It's up on the screen for you guys right here. We will talk to you probably a little bit later this evening. So set those alarm bells. We'll talk to you then.